Today, we're talking about a group and a band leader and a song that are really like no other. In the 1970s, they put funk on a completely different stratosphere with their LSD-fueled theatrics and Afro-futurist storytelling.
And with today's song, they brought spaced-out synths, hypnotic grooves, and a mix of sci-fi proto-rap and gospel-infused doo-wop harmonies to the top of the charts in 1976.
That's right. Today, we're going to ask the question, did this song lay the groundwork for almost 3 solid decades for the genre we know as hip-hop? So put a glide in your stride and a dip in your hip and come on up to the Mothership. We're talking one song, and that song is Mothership Connection by Parliament. I'm actor, writer, director, and sometimes DJ Diallo Riddle.
And I'm producer, DJ, songwriter, and musicologist LUXXURY, aka the guy who whispers.
Interpolation.
And if you want to watch one song, you can watch this full episode on YouTube and Spotify. And while you're there, please like and subscribe.
And since June is Black Music Month, we're going to be celebrating Black artists all month here on One Song. And I couldn't think of a better song than today's to kick us off.
Look, for all the dip in the hip stuff going on with this song, there's a crick in my neck for like a week solid of listening to nothing but P-Funk in Parliament because it is, you cannot listen without doing this. And the songs are long, so you're doing this for a long time. We were all doing it in the room. So crick in your neck, add that to the list.
I will make sure that that goes on the permanent list.
I appreciate that. All right, so Diallo, when was the first time you heard Mothership Connection?
Oh man, honestly, I'm going to admit something, and this is me being vulnerable. I think the first time I heard it was after I heard Dr. Dre's Chronic, Let Me Ride.
Creeping down the back street on D's. I got my Glock cocked cause niggas want these. No soon as I said it, seems I got sweated by some nigga.
I wasn't an idiot. I knew that hip-hop was sampling all these songs. And I probably heard like Atomic Dog and some of the other songs. This was not one of those songs that I knew.
Yeah.
And my friend Joe
But you didn't know the original you mean?
Yeah, like there was some...
Could you tell it was something older, though? Like that was being reinterpreted?
Of course, yeah.
Okay,
I'm saying, like, I could probably tell, but it was when my friend Joe bought the Best of Parliament Funkadelic CD, and I heard the original. I was like, oh, man, Dre didn't change that much. Like, basically, the entire musical bed of the song. It wasn't like how, DJ Premier and Pete Rock necessarily sampled. The East Coast always chopped it up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like Dre kind of just took the musical bed of the song and, actually kept like what sounded like the same singers, even though I'm sure we'll find out it was an interpolation. But it was just interesting to hear how similar the two songs were.
Right. That is what you were hearing.
Yeah.
You were hearing songs interpolated, but also the same instruments were used in the replay. There's a blueprint that was used not just for that song, but the Chronic in general. To quote him, he says, the whole Mothership album was on the Chronic. Quote, he took the whole album and just rapped over it. So that connection makes total sense. And I think it's a reason why a new generation has a connection to this earlier
Absolutely.
music.
Look, there's no way that me and Joe would have been riding around Atlanta listening to the best of Parliament and Funkadelic at that particular time in our lives had it not been for the fact that George had cleared these samples or somebody had cleared these samples.
But that is a big part of the story and a big part of what this song, the groundwork for what we're laying is the connection between P-Funk into G-Funk and into modern hip-hop.
Absolutely. What about you, LUXXURY? What was the first time you heard this song?
We're going to get into P-Funk, meaning Parliament, and Funkadelic, meaning George Clinton's musical empire. But it's two bands that are really one group of musicians. And I heard the other group. I heard Funkadelic. Mm-hmm. When I was the music director, I think I mentioned this on the Metallic episode, at my college radio station, Georgetown WGTB, there was a record in there that jumped out to me. It was Funkadelic's 1975, Let's Take It to the Stage, because the artwork was so cool. It's a psychedelic drawing by Pedro Bell, who did all the Funkadelic covers. And I heard this song, and it just blew my mind. This is Get Off Your Ass and Jam. You might recognize the solo that begins it, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So the song starts with this iconic sound. That iconic beat.
A couple of quick things. One, is that the Public Enemy sample at the very beginning?
So that is sampled very famously in Bring the Noise by Public Enemy, 1987.
How low can you go? Death row? What a brother know. Once again, back is the incredible rhyme animal.
So that entire thing, the guitar solo and the God, those are both from the Funkadelic
By the
song.
way, I feel like if he didn't sample that, that is absolutely the sound that Prince was chasing in his later career.
Oh, yeah.
Like that sort of like,
Right.
Yeah.
Because guitar solos and hip hop and funk.
And Prince went really funk after sort of hip hop sort of guiding the culture forward.
So there's one of my favorite stories in all of music. We tell stories all the time. We've got 90 episodes of this show.
We're just telling stories.
We're just telling stories. That guitar solo, what you hear at the beginning of the track, and by the way, goes through the whole track. He's soloing the whole time. And in the Public Enemy sample, by the way, it's also in an NWA sample.
Yeah.
It's also in Ice-T's original 99 Problems.
They love me back, that's why they stay with me. So if you're having girl problems, I'll prepare for your son. Got 99 problems and a bitch ain't one. Hit it.
The funny thing is that it's a total mystery who's playing. In George Clinton's words, the story of how that happened is that, quote, a white kid wandered into the studio. He was a smack addict, and he wanted to know if he could play and pick up some cash. So we started the track. He just started to play like he was possessed. Even when the song ended, he was still playing. We'd agreed on $25, but I gave him 50. But he tried to find the guy to put him on more music, and he couldn't find him. The guy just came in, did the solo, and disappeared from life. So, like, we don't really know who did it. Now, many years later, this guy called Paul Warren claimed it was him in an interview in 2009. Might have been him, but maybe not. So I love the fact that we just have no idea who did this iconic solo, which is the part that's sampled on all these other songs.
Okay, well, since you mentioned Funkadelic, I think we should take a moment right here at the beginning to tease out what is the difference between Parliament and Funkadelic, because even I was confused coming into this episode. I've always heard these two, names thrown out. Obviously, I thought they were kind of the same group, but they clearly had two different names. So to be clear, there are two bands led by George Clinton with overlapping members, and they tour as one big collective band called Parliament Funkadelic.
Right, or P-Funk.
Or P-Funk, yeah, that's where the term P-Funk actually comes from.
George Clinton comes from New Jersey, Plainfield, and he starts as a barbershop, like literally a hairstylist.
Doo-wop.
They're doing barbershop and doo-wop, but literally in the barbershop with him as the barber, which I love. So the original 5 members of the band are called the Parliaments.
Right.
They struggle for a little bit. They get a hit around 1967, but then they have a dispute with their record label, Reveille, over the name. So what they do is when they were touring, they had these musicians and they called them Funkadelic. And when they had this dispute over the name, they just kind of swapped and said, well, we're called Funkadelic now. And that kind of allowed them to escape from this clause.
I love how analog that is. It's like you have issues with your record label, just change the name of the group and take those same people elsewhere.
It's a solution.
It doesn't happen so much nowadays. So how does the name Parliament come back into the fold?
So at this point, around 1970, they relaunched Parliament as a new band, but they took off the S.
And dropped the.
I don't know why they got away with it, but they did. Like that was enough to be distinctive.
It's just like if John and Paul had some issues, so they came back as Beatle.
Yeah, and to be... Different band, guys.
Hey, totally different band.
Same people.
4 guys.
Same 4 guys.
Beatle.
Not even wearing masks or anything tricky. Just like... Take off the S. Very simple.
But here's one of the reasons why I love you, my man, because until this week, I didn't realize that there are some real sonic differences between Parliament and Funkadelic.
Yeah.
So to be clear, Funkadelic had more rock influences. Right. It was guitar heavy and had anything sort of goes production style.
Totally.
While Parliament was more straight funk, horn heavy, and had a more smooth, you could almost say commercial style.
Absolutely, yeah. So in George's own words, quote, Parliament was the glitter, the commercial, and Funkadelic was the loose, the harsh.
Yeah.
And he said there was kind of, they had some sort of rules that they sometimes broke, like, quote, no psychedelic guitars for Parliament, no horns for Funkadelic.
Oh, interesting.
So there are, Parliament is kind of cleaner. It is definitely strictly funk. You have more long funk jams.
Yeah.
And Funkadelic, from one album to the next.
That's his play space. That's where he's like, hey, I'm going to do some weird, crazy stuff influenced by some of these, rock guys.
Right. So an important part of this story is that they made the move from New Jersey to Detroit in the late 60s, and they start playing with some of these legends. They're on stage with the MC5, with Iggy and the Stooges. Like, they're friends with, they're seeing Alice Cooper, they're seeing Ted Nugent. All of these bands are playing together and influencing each other. So there's kind of this sort of gospel and doo-wop and funk and R&B that the Parliaments and Funkadelic are bringing to the stage. And then they watch Ted Nugent shred and Alice Cooper, with his costumes and crazy stage show. And all of these things are in the mix of what becomes Parliament and Funkadelic.
And the drugs.
And the drugs.
And the drugs definitely influence the music. I think it would be helpful to hear some examples. So here's an example of them being very experimental and psychedelic. Here's a little bit of Cosmic Slop by Funkadelic from 1973.
Would you like to dance with me? cosmic swamp. Would you like to dance with me within the cosmic swamp?
For those of you listening to audio only, we just showed a clip of the band in a park in front of an amphitheater stage. And let me just say that you might want to pull the car over before you take a look at the visual. It's quite shocking.
Yeah. It's like stills from, it's like Godspell, like these sort of hippie clown circus.
Hippie clowns.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it's like
the
18
makeup
band
and the
members,
masks.
one bar of soap.
And there's a diaper, right? Diaper guy. That's literally his nickname was Diaper Guy. There's Diaper Guy. Yeah.
Diaper Guy is so iconic.
He's so iconic.
You can't do, when we did Sherman Showcase and we did a group that was supposed to be like Parliament, it was called Dazzling Dalbert.
Yeah.
Like
Diaper Man.
Yeah, we had a group of guys who looked like that. We definitely had one guy on stage in a diaper.
Yeah, that's Gary Scheider, who plays into this song that we're talking about today. An example of him overlapping. Sometimes they want to let their freak flag hang fly with rock and guitars and riffs, and sometimes it's a strict groove. So that's the two sides of P-Funk right there.
And just for comparison's sake, here's a Parliament track, not a Funkadelic track, a Parliament track from the same era, 1974's Up for the Downstroke.
Get up.
Everybody get up. Get up on the downstroke. Everybody get up.
The crick in my neck is only going to get worse as this hour goes
It's
by.
so crazy.
Ugh.
So Funkadelic, I feel like
cannot.
I'm hanging out with Sly and the Family Stone. I feel like I'm hanging out with like my favorite rock group. When you hear Up for the Downstroke, you feel like you're like playing, backgammon with Sidney Poitier in a basement party. Like it feels a lot
refined.
more Afro-friendly.
Oh, okay.
It is
With a
remarkable
cleaner
that
sound,
they had, and it might even speak to what we've referred to in the past as the balkanization of music and radio programming at the time, that they essentially had a funk group that sounds extremely black, for the lack of a better term, and then Funkadelic, which is like their experimental group for like when they're hanging out with their white friends, of which they have many.
Yeah, and apparently their working process, according to Bernie Worrell, who we'll be talking about, one of our unsung heroes, is that they would record nonstop. They would be in the studio for hours on end. They'd wear out their engineers, jamming, kind of coming up with ideas. And then George would sort of like assess what the material was and make a determination which camp it would go into. Does this feel more like a Parliament thing? Does it feel like it belongs to the story I'm trying to tell with Funkadelic?
Yeah.
So the material is all done by the same people in the same places. And it's just kind of the finishing touches, and maybe the vocals were the last step that would determine which entity
it's like Damon Albarn saying, like, is this a Blur song or a Gorillaz song? I'm not sure.
Exactly right. And by the way, the Empire doesn't just include Funkadelic and Parliament. P-Funk includes Bootsy had his own band. Another unsung hero, bass player, Bootsy Collins.
Sure.
Bootsy's Rubber Band, another incredible band that was incredibly successful. There's the Brides of Funkenstein, the P-Funk All-Stars, Parlet, Horny Horns. Eddie Hazel and Bernie Worrell all had solo projects. There's about 8 or 9 different entities under the umbrella, but they all toured together. Mothership Connection is where it all comes together.
Dude, I'm learning so much. So basically we're saying that Bootsy Collins and Bernie Worrell are like basically George Clinton's closest collaborators.
Yeah, at this time, that's the brain trust. The three of them are at the core of the songwriting process, including for today's song.
I love that. So let's talk about Bootsy Collins for a moment. Before Parliament and Funkadelic, Bootsy Collins was in James Brown's band. He joined James Brown's band when he was only 17. I can't imagine my teenagers on tour with James Brown. Maybe I'm too good a father. Maybe I should just let them loose. And funnily enough, he gets kicked out of James Brown's group just 11 months after he joins. There are so many funny stories during this period. One of my favorite is that during his brief time with the band, he actually got James to trip out accidentally on LSD. Here's a clip from Mike Judge's awesome animated show about music, Tales from the Tour Bus.
What we would do was we would crush up 2 or 3 orange sunshine and put it in whatever we're drinking, and we would pass them around, you know.
Orange Sunshine was the name of maybe the most popular version of LSD known to man.
James Brown comes over to join us, and he says, "Hit me." And it's like, "Nah," I said, you don't want none of this. And he's like, "Give it, give it." So I'm saying to myself, do I give it to him? Yeah, give it to him. So he starts just going at it.
And even after that insane moment, it's actually, like I said, 11 months after he joins the group, that James is like, I don't like your playing when you're on LSD or even when you're not on LSD. I don't love your playing. You're out of the group. So
that's crazy,
Bootsy's kicked out of the group.
But when he gets kicked out, he still takes with him a treasure that James Brown gives him, which is this concept known as the one.
We've talked about the one on other episodes.
Yeah.
But for those who haven't listened to every episode, shame on you. Tell us about the one.
The one is simply the concept that the downbeat is the one that gets the most accent in any measure. The first beat of the bar, as long as you're literally playing a note on that bar, the bass in particular, you're going to be setting up the groove. And from there, almost anything goes. In other words, Bootsy's an incredible bass player, and he puts a lot of content. He's playing melodies, he's playing cool fills, he's playing runs. James's point was it's a little busy, which you can do as long as you hit that root on the downbeat. The rest of it is up to you.
Which actually goes so against what reggae does. Isn't it insane how opposite funk and reggae are?
Exactly right. But rather than have me explain it, let's hear Bootsy himself say it.
Hit on the one, you know, one, you know. And then you would try to fit your different notes, what you felt in between that, like, you know, and that's the funk.
What's super interesting to me about Bootsy leaving James Brown to join George Clinton and bringing with him that treasure of this concept of the one is that it's also like kind of exactly at the moment, maybe not coincidentally, where James Brown is a little bit, he's kind of peaking. 1973, we have Big Payback. In 74, maybe his last good record.
More than a decade on top.
I'm mad to get down with my girlfriend. That ain't right.
Payback is a little bit the peak.
And Payback is great.
Payback is peak. He's been on top, but these are his last kind of good records, because after his 39th record in 1974,
39th.
By 75, he's kind of doing, the records aren't as good. It's kind of bad disco. He's redoing old songs, but they're not as good. It's like Papa's got a brand new bag.
Papa got a brand new bag.
Literally.
I love it when an artist, it's like, take any artist, like it's like a David Bowie done Let's Dance again.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Look, we're freaking huge James Brown fans. That will be another episode, maybe a double someday. So that's this moment. And he goes to Clinton, who is on the upswing, up for the downstroke we just mentioned, and Chocolate City and Mothership Connection, which are the next ones, and the Funkadelic record, Let's Take It to the Stage. That's 1975. Yeah. That's the beginning of a 5-6 year run where he can do no wrong. Well, he does a few wrong. Let me take that back. There are some misses in the catalog, but for the most part, I mean, I'm a huge fan of this man, and that 1970s run is insane. There's hit after hit after hit.
So we've talked about Bootsy, and now we got to talk about keyboard player Bernie Worrell, because, I mean, like, we could literally do a whole episode, I think you'd agree, on just Bernie alone. He was a classically trained music prodigy. And after working with P-Funk, he goes on to work with some of our absolute favorites. He works with Talking Heads when they're in their Stop Making Sense phase. He also did the keyboards on Mtume's classic Juicy Fruit.
Very well what you are. You're my sugar thing. A
lot of y'all know that as Notorious B.I.G.'s Juicy, but yeah, Juicy Fruit, absolute classic. And Bernie's he's an amazing collaborator when it comes to his time with George Clinton. I mean, one of our absolute favorite Parliament songs, in fact, one of the most sampled songs in hip-hop history, is the song that Bernie writes with George and Bootsy, Flashlight. You hear the keyboards.
Hey, guys and girls dancing. Oh my God.
And who's doing that? Who's that?
Oh my God. That is Bernie Worrell on the bass. It's not Bootsy on the bass.
It's not Bootsy on the bass.
Bootsy's playing drums.
So Bernie's playing the keyboards and the bass on this one.
The bass is the keyboard. The bass is that Moog. So Bernie is not just like one of the main songwriters of the trio of George, Bernie, and Bootsy. He's also the band leader. He is the one that brings this musicality, literally knowing a lot of times, translating what notes, what chords.
Listen,
for some of the other musicians to actually play and arrangement ideas that comes from him a lot of the time.
You and I have worked on music. I never play the drums on anything that we've worked on. In fact, I have so much love for George Clinton. I did not know this. He doesn't play. George does not play any instruments. He's the leader of two bands, two great legacy, like Rock and Roll Hall of Fame level bands.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't play
He can communicate his musicality verbally. Yeah. He also sings. So he has a barbershop quartet background, doo-wop background.
Yeah.
So he knows the melodies. He knows the notes. He's filled with ideas. And he has these great collaborators around him who can turn them into what gets recorded.
Listen, George Clinton embodies the creative spirit and vision of Parliament Funkadelic. And as you can see, this really comes through on the album Mothership Connection. I mean, like, Clinton wanted to create a concept album like all his favorite, big rock bands like The Who and Pink Floyd, because they were doing these kind of things at the time. Except, here's the difference, George wanted to funk it up.
Yeah.
So to speak. He envisioned the first ever funk opera that imagined Black folks as intergalactic beings in space. Clinton, by the way, huge Trekkie. Let's listen to the opening track of Mothership Connection. P-Funk wants to get funked up.
Make my funk the P-Funk.
Listen, I know there are cameras in this room and they're picking up what I'm doing, and that's on me, but I can't help it. I cannot help it. This is one of my favorite all-time artists across everything, and the crick in the neck, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Love that song so much.
Totally. And another thing this album illustrates is that P-Funk wasn't just a band, but a multifaceted production and performance entity.
That's true. And in fact, I would actually, because they're on Casablanca, which is the same as like Kisses. And so you've got all these like bands that are known for like their theatrical.
Oh, Village People, the Kids, right? They're all on there.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Parliament has like the guy in the diaper, Village People has like the guy dressed like a Native American.
Right.
Like clearly there was a lot in the sauce at Casablanca Records.
But there's also footage of George Clinton wearing the same headdress earlier. So like they're all looking at each other.
There's
they're
actually
all inspiring each
a
other.
Pretty famous picture of George wearing what are clearly Kiss boots in a promo. Wow. Yeah, so like they were clearly
shopping
there's
at
a
the
lot
same
going on in
vendors,
those offices.
Right.
Oh, just to be a fly on the wall. Or the camel, the gigantic wicker camel that was apparently in the lobby of Casablanca Records. If I had a time machine, I'd just want to visit the Sunset Boulevard offices of Casablanca.
In 1975, right?
Because Kiss is performing so big. And the Village People and
Donna Summer's being signed around this time too.
There's a quote in this book about Casablanca Records by Larry Harris called "And Party Every Day." It's a great quote because you got to remember Parliament signed with Casablanca Records in 1973. By the time 1976 rolls around and George has all these elaborate ideas about a concept album and a stage production show, which is insane, we find out this. This is the quote. Quote, Parliament's concerts were out of this world, even without the expensive Mothership production. About halfway through the set, during Mothership Connection, guitarist Glenn Goins would repeatedly sing the line, "I think I see the mothership coming. I think I see the mothership coming." The other band members would point toward the back of the house just as pyro ignited. Then the silver mothership would begin flying over the arena floor above the lighting ring. And then at that point, George Clinton would descend, walking with a cane and like with his pimp stride, a gliding stride, you might. And they would sing their song. Here's a 1976 clip from that tour where you can see the mothership landing and Clinton emerging. Let's take a look. Oh my God. If you were like smoked out, like this would be insane.
Crazy.
It's got disco balls on the sides. Look at them. They're going nuts.
Why wouldn't you? This is like Daft Punk level. And by the way,
pyramid.
Same shape, same object. Yeah. It still worked.
This is the pyramid.
This is the pyramid.
This is so good.
What we wouldn't give to be on to like be witnessing that. It must have been insane. Like that isn't normal to like see productions like that in that era.
Not nowadays.
Not even now.
Unless you go to Coachella. Whew. I mean, by the way, as you can see in this clip, I can't help but think of just Afrofuturism. I mean, like, to put it simply, for those who aren't aware, Afrofuturism is a way of reimagining the future or even the distant past in a galaxy far, far away through a Black cultural lens. This can be said for the music of Sun Ra, the writing of Octavia Butler, as well as Marvel's Black Panther series.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really worth pointing out how much thought went into these productions and the concepts. George Clinton has a whole George Lucas-esque backstory for the entirety of his catalog, of his output. It's all extremely thought through. He really is a Trekkie. He also talks a lot about this book called Chariots of the Gods.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about Chariots later on.
Chariots are coming up.
Which is by Eric von Däniken, which is Afrofuturism, another Afrofuturism tome. And it's got some logic to it, and there's a canon to it. It emerges over time as a fan, and maybe not all the mysteries are unraveled, but we just saw, for example, Sir Nose Devoid of Funk, who's the bad guy. Then there's Dr. Funkenstein, who's the good guy. This all sort of plays out on stage and through the albums, this storytelling, this Afrofuturistic storytelling.
To hear Clinton tell it, funk was brought to Earth by aliens aboard UFOs, and it was stored inside the Great Egyptian Pyramids. So between what George Clinton is doing and what Maurice White is doing over with Earth, Wind, and Fire, there's just a lot of Afrofuturism, Black Pride, pro-Black, stuff in the music.
It's really important to point out this is before Star Wars. Yes. There's Star Trek, but the whole outer space sci-fi thing is a global phenomenon of like with box office receipts in the billions hadn't happened yet. Star Wars is 2 years after Mothership Connection.
But at that time, we did not know that James Earl Jones would be the voice of Darth Vader. So we got in there a little bit. We got in Star Wars a little bit. All right, we're going to take a break. But when we come back, we're going to take a trip on the Mothership. We're going to hear how this song lays the groundwork for hip-hop. And we'll tell you what song George was probably interpolating with this song. Stay tuned. If your brain is already at full capacity with to-dos and errands, birthdays, and the dinner plan for Tuesday, let Skylight Calendar handle the rest. It syncs your entire family schedule onto a sleek digital display. So you can focus on more important things like remembering where you left your coffee. Oh, it's right here.
That's right, Diallo. Skylight Calendar was designed to connect the digital and non-digital worlds while bringing families together.
Skylight Calendar is a Wi-Fi connected digital display that showcases your family schedule with clarity, color, and brilliance in either a 10 or 15-inch HD touchscreen.
This all-in-one smart calendar syncs seamlessly with Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, Outlook, and more, giving you customizable views for daily, weekly, or monthly planning.
You'll be able to manage events, chores, and grocery lists while assigning colors for each of your family members and eliminating excuses of not knowing what they needed to do. Jeffrey, you knew what time it was. We have the Skylight Calendar.
You're blue on the calendar. That's your color. With the free Skylight Companion app, you can add or update events, lists, and more on the go.
Your happiness is Skylight's happiness. So if in 120 days you are not 100% thrilled with your purchase, you can return it for a full refund. No questions asked.
Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/onesong.
Go to skylightcal.com/onesong for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That is skylightcal.com/onesong. Okay, so Luxury, before we get into the stems, what can you tell us about how this song was made?
Yeah, so George Clinton talks about how the origin of this song is that he came up with the "Me and the Boys" line. It just popped in his head. We don't know more about where it came from, but we do know that he hummed it, what would become the instrumental hook. He hummed it to his collaborators, to Bernie Worrell to Bootsy Collins. The three of them together came up with the song. Well, let's just hear it in George's own words.
One of the few times where I had to actually get in there and hum it to the musicians. And basically, you can see that is the basic groove throughout the whole song. All the coloring around it is from the artsy-fartsy minds that work with me.
Sure.
And it's one of the simplest songs that we've done. I looked at the tracks just now. Wasn't that many needles moving on that one. It was really a neat one.
I love that idea. Like he gave it to Bernie for the artsy-fartsy stuff. Meaning, another quote where he says, Bernie put his classical stuff around it. So George has melodies, he has ideas, he has lyrics, he has huge concepts for Motherships and Afro-Futurist, decades of
reading
storytelling.
And learning and taking stuff in.
And armed with his collaborators, Bernie and Bootsy in particular, they're able to flesh that out into, take a melody and turn it into a chord, for example, and then sort of flesh out how the song gets arranged as well. Because in this song, what's interesting, we were just talking about this, is that it's one long groove, but then there's this B section, which is a completely new idea. We sort of take it for granted because we know the song, but it comes kind of from out of nowhere. It's sort of a different song. Then we go back to the groove. Then it's like the A section, a little bit of a B, then the A again, then a little bit of a B, which is how the song ends.
If it was classical music, you'd almost call it like different fugues within the composition.
A couple things woven together. And one thing that I want to call attention to as we listen to the stems is how the A to B transition, that's something that a band, I can tell you from firsthand experience as being a player, as a drummer or as a bass player, I've been in these roles where you know that you're going to change at some point, and so do the other musicians, but we don't know, it's not written down anywhere. There's not like a clock you're watching. It's either a vibe or someone who kind of motions or puts their arm up. This is musician language. And that's George in this band. It's George who would do the nod going, okay, we're going to the B section now. But it's funny because there's a few false starts. There's a few moments where I can hear the drummer kind of go, are we going here? No, not yet. Okay, back to the A. Dun-dun. So that's how they made this song together.
All right, tell us about how the song got recorded.
Right. So we have a couple more names to put out there that are really unsung heroes because as we discussed, Parliament, the sound of Parliament is extraordinarily clean. And listening back to these 50-year-old records, to my ears, they sound fairly modern by
I would just go on a limb and say those Casey and the Sunshine Band recordings sound like stuffy and muffled and dusty.
Aww.
But these sound pretty, no, I love them.
Poor
but I'm just saying,
Casey.
like, I don't know who mastered them. They don't sound modern or clean. These are some clean recordings. I think that's what helps get them sampled so often. But please, tell us about the recording.
So the song is produced by George Clinton.
Yep.
But as we know, George Clinton was doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
Both musically.
Coming up with the music and having fun.
Some of them were having fun. That's right. So how did it get on tape? Well, we have two unsung heroes to thank for how well recorded this is.
Okay.
Not to mention recorded at all. One of them is Jim Callan, engineer 1, and Jim Viddy, engineer 2. My understanding in listening to an interview with Jim Callan is that Jim Viddy recorded the band in Detroit, and then the tapes went to LA where they were mixed. So these two guys made it sound incredible, both in the recording and in the mixing stage.
So let's get into some stems, and maybe we start where we usually start, which is the drums.
Cool. Well, listen, let's talk about the drums. This is Jerome Eugene Bigfoot Braley on the drums. By the way, co-wrote Give Up the Funk, Tear the Roof Off the Sucker, with Clinton and Collins. And he was the central drummer on the tour that we just watched that incredible footage of. And here he is. One thing to notice is that crash is every 2 bars. Like clockwork, you're going to get a crash every 2 bars. And that's a Funkadelic thing. Not every song all the time, but like, one thing I've really noticed in deconstructing these songs is they're kind of setting up, with that, you feel like it's a loop. With that, you feel like it's a 2-bar phrase where everything kind of happens. The bass, the chords, all of that are kind of contained and then repeat from one 2-bar chunk to the next. And that crash is like your brain's clue, your cue that it's like, again. And it becomes this hypnotic thing. Which, when we get to the B section that we mentioned a moment ago, that there's just 2 sections, that beat happens the entirety of the main A section, the main loop. When we get to the B section, the beat changes slightly. And here's the B section groove. See if you can tell the difference. Oh, no crash there. So this is the swing low sweet chariot section. It's got 4 on the floor, just kind of moving straight forward. We don't have the syncopated kick anymore.
Yeah.
And we don't have those 2 cymbals that we were just talking about.
Don't have the cymbals. It almost sounds more like a really slowed disco, like a 92 BPM disco sound, because it's more steady.
Totally. Oh, we got to talk about the BPMs on this record too, because this is like an late 80s into 90s BPM record, which...
To be clear, we're talking about not the 1980s and the 1990s, to be clear.
The
we're
actual
not insane.
number, right.
The actual number
this
80s,
groove
90s,
zone is extraordinarily P-Funk.
Yes.
Like it's extraordinarily Parliament to have these slower grooves. Disco starts to be in the 110s, 120s.
I would say the slowest disco is like 104, 105.
Sure.
And most of it is like 120. The really fast stuff is in the 130s.
Right.
This is so slowed down. But the only reason I bring it up is just because in this section, the Swing Low Sweet Chariot section, it's like a extremely slowed down, almost like you're tripping on acid
because of the 4 on the floor, right? We've got this 90
BPM, a little 4 on the floor.
Groove.
It's a little
But this is relevant to our connection to P-Funk into G-Funk.
Yes, I was going to say in the 1990s, hip hop was primarily, I would say, between 82 at the absolute slowest. Most of it was like 85, 87 up to about, like if you got to like 99, people looked at you funny. Like it was just like, man, is he trying to go mainstream? Like it really was like high 80s, low 90s in terms of BPM. And, you know, sonically that made this music really easy to sample because it was already in like the time zone. It wasn't much of a stretch to start rapping over it.
Part of the magic of what George Clinton finds with his formula is that in this BPM zone, that crick in the neck thing I was talking about, you just can't stop but do this. If it were too fast, you couldn't do it. It would hurt. And also instrumentally more relevant, to the stems that we're getting into, you can do more with the space that allows for.
Yeah.
It's not so slow that you have a lot of space and it's slow.
Yeah.
There's a groove, but it's right in this magic hang zone where you can do crazy stuff with the bass lines. You can throw in some fills, or you can hang back and let it be silent for a moment.
All right, it's Bootsy time here at One Song. We want to talk about the bass, and given some of the conversations we've had about, for example, Flashlight, my first question is, who is playing the bass? Is it Bootsy?
William Earl Bootsy Collins is indeed playing the bass.
Okay, good to know.
Right, so we talked about how Bootsy brings the one with him from James Brown to George Clinton. And let's listen to what that sounds like in the context of this song. Here's Bootsy hitting the one. I'll give you the drums for the context. 1. And notice the one is just the one. 1. And then he's syncopating, leaving little spaces, little fill.
Can you give us just the bass, though, without the drums covering up?
1. And he's doing something
I don't know the
every time.
variations. Yeah, I love this.
And he's got this Neutron phaser and maybe a little bit of a wah effect on there.
Say, why does it sound like it's
That's why it sounds watery. That's why it sounds watery. What you're hearing is that there are 2 different bass tracks. So there's an amplifier which has a mic set up, and that's what you're hearing. There's a second bass that's mixed in with it, which is DI to the board, and that sounds like this. And together, you're going to get the full sound. Now that's both of those signals combined, which gives it less tin can. There is a third bass, which is clavinet, is playing, doubling that line. And this is Bernie Worrell, who after Bootsy played through the whole song, went back and overdubbed a clavinet that doubles Bootsy's thing. So you have a stack of 3 things playing each of these notes.
Yeah.
And here's what that sounds like. So that bass line has got 3 signals, bass content. And it's tight, but it's loose. It's tight, but it's loose.
Yeah, they're not even playing the same note every single time.
It's grooving, it's tight, and yet it's loose and funky. It's this like complete contradiction in ways.
In some ways, it's taking full advantage of the fact that this isn't music out of the computer, as we like to call it. Like, this is
music by real humans.
Is essentially 3 different humans, even though it's 2 different humans, but essentially 3 human beings playing something, sometimes varying what they're playing, and then layering it.
I mentioned before that this is an A-B song, right? The A section, we're in the A section, it's the main groove, it's one with the syncopated kick drum. We're about to move to that other beat that we played before, which is the 4 on the floor, and that's the Sweet and Low Sweet Chariot. There's this moment that I just noticed, and I just felt like I understood what was happening. I felt my musician kinship was happening. Listen to what the drums and bass play here. It feels like they think they're going to be, but they're not yet.
Oh, I love this.
Nope, one more. George is like, not yet.
Yeah.
George is like, not yet. You got one more. We're not there yet. But finally, they do go to the B section. And here's what that sounds like for Bootsy first.
Man, I feel like I'm a undercover cop with a fro and some bell bottoms, and I'm just trying to find out who's got the heroin.
Oh, wait till you hear what I'm about to add back in. Remember that clav?
Oh, I know the clavinet's doing a lot in this section. Let's hear it, man.
This is Bernie Worrell on clav. I mentioned that he was a moment ago in the A section. He was just doubling what Bootsy was doing. But now he's got a really important
Here comes
part.
his star solo.
And that really makes this part, right? Let's put everything in there. I'll put the drums and bass at least back. It just fits right in those little spaces.
Now, if Worrell's playing that, I just got to ask, who's playing the keys on this song?
That is, Worrell's
the
playing all the
clavinet
keys.
is the only keys on the song?
No. There's a few parts that are overdubbed. So Worrell's playing all of the keyboards in this song. So
because this song has like very famous synths.
Let's just get into it. We're
I want to
there.
hear the synths,
We
baby.
got there. Let's hear some
Famous
synths.
synths.
So Bernie Worrell is credited with the mini moog, the arp, string ensemble, which we just talked about in the Rayers episode, same instrument. And it's a very, to my ears, it's a super iconic Parliament instrument. That's a very high synth string sound, which isn't strings. It's a keyboard, but that's on this one too. And as you just heard, there's clavinet and Rhodes and Worley, etc. But he's playing all of them. Let's hear some of the synths. These are all happening together with this. We need a little timekeeping, right? I'm a little lost. Where's the one? So crazy. Yeah, that's a little later.
Where is that?
Let's
the
jump to that.
too?
There it is. Ooh, that's so piercing.
I love it though. To me, that almost sounds like that could have been generated by like some weird, Morse code machine or something like that. But it's that part, it's that really high synth that doesn't seem like it should go as high as it goes that truly makes this part of the song.
I think part of what Bernie Worrell's genius is that he's got all these he's got all the knowledge musical and he's got all the instruments and these new sounds.
Child prodigy, put your children in those music classes, it pays off.
And he's experimenting and it's okay. He feels the looseness about like trying things and seeing where it goes rather than finding the perfect part and finding comping chords and jazz stuff. It's like it's I think it's sonic. That's what it is. It's sound based. He's really going for what sound is interesting here. What is an interesting melody and interesting sound?
It's not boring.
Here? Yeah.
And as music listeners, we just don't want to be bored. Oh man, that synth is so good. As we saw in that wonderful footage out in the park in front of the amphitheater, there are a lot of musicians in this group. What are some other instruments you want to isolate for us?
All right, well, there's some guitar on this track, although it's pretty low in the mix in the final, but it's fun that we get to hear it a little more prominently.
Because it's a Parliament song, it's not Funkadelic, where the guitars would probably be more prominent.
Would they be potentially soloing and riffing the whole
sometimes.
Okay, so we know that credited on the record are Glenn Goins and Gary Scheider, a.k.a. Starchild, a.k.a. Diaper Man, on guitar, and also Michael Hampton.
Even the guy in the diaper was playing more instruments than George Clinton.
He wasn't just wearing a diaper. He had a function.
Clearly. No, he absolutely did.
So I'm pretty sure this is Gary Scheider, but I'm not positive. It's one of those records where it's just a list for every song and it isn't mapped to the song who played what where. But here's the guitar part. That's the hook, basically. And here it is on all the other instruments.
It's doo-wop. They're harmonizing. These instruments are harmonizing like a doo-wop group.
They're in unison up until this really exciting moment, which is one of my favorites. So there's this one fill that you hear harmonize is what you're referring to. Here's the guitar part by itself, and then I'll build on it so you can hear how the harmony stack came together. Right? That's one little hook.
I know that fill.
The other part of it is in the clavinet. And when you put them together, it's...
Yeah, that's really nice.
Right? I'll give you the context of that. So we get...
And it contributes to the underwater feel of it all.
It's the underwater feel.
That's like the jellyfish swimming away.
Yeah. Yeah, and it contributes to the magic trick of how this song is simultaneously a groove and a jam that could go on for days.
Yeah.
But has just enough little variation and the change to the beat, of course.
It's not a repetition that's going to drive you nuts.
It's not repetition that's going to drive you nuts. That's right. It's really satisfying when you get these little things like that fill.
It's not the Roots Reggae Band playing at Senior Frogs. You're like, I got to get the hell out of here. The horns are really cool in this song. I read where Fred Wesley had a bit of a culture shock coming to the sessions because, he said the guys in the band would come in dressed in their admittedly flamboyant character costumes during the sessions, and Wesley would come in wearing a three-piece suit because that's what he was used to working with James Brown.
Well, that's exactly right. See, now we have a connection to the James Brown connection again. On this record, we have two more former James Brown JBs join the band, thanks to Bootsy, who brings them in. It is Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker on trombone and sax, respectively, a.k.a. the Horny Horns from the JBs.
Horns.
Yeah, this is their first record, and Wesley also says that he brought in some bebop licks. His modality for how to come up with a part basically came from his jazz background. So he's thinking, what bebop can I put in here into this funk medley, this stew? So this bouillabaisse of sounds and styles also has a little bit of like 40s jazz in it.
Absolutely. I think, Fred Wesley famously is very prominently displayed on Doing It to Death. In fact, that's the song where you hear James give him a special shout. He's like, Fred!
Fred, can you take us higher? Yeah. Take us higher. Fred! Fred! Fred!
Those JB's records are so
They're
good.
They're so good.
Yeah.
And by the way, Horny Horns have like a great career. They're on Paul Abdul's Vibology. They're on Delight's Groove is in the Heart.
Along with Bootsy, who's also on that song.
Yes.
Another connection.
Exactly. The funk lived on. So it's the Horny Horns. So there's somebody else on there.
That's right. We also have a couple Brecker brothers, Randy and his brother Michael, and Boom and Joe Farrell are also credited. So we have about 6 horns, and you'll hear them when we isolate it, that they're all harmonizing and stacking together quite nicely to make this. And there's little bebop licks, little like syncopated, like, Charlie Parker inspired parts right there.
Well, he said he was a big fan of Louis Jordan, which makes sense because Louis was doing all this kind of like jazz. So it's sort of like a big band version of Boogie Woogie.
Yeah.
That would have influenced that since that music came out in like the 50s, that would have definitely influenced what George and his parents' generation was into.
Right.
And so that comes to bear in this song.
And then in the B section, they do a little call and response, which is fun. And then they're on a different downbeat. It's interesting how they kind of create oral interest with these crazy, like really constructed parts. The rest of it is spontaneous, but with these are written parts.
This is regimented.
You got 6 people that got to play something that they all know what it is. So this is the part which is arranged and determined in advance, while the rest is as a jam.
And you can really hear the call and response.
Yeah, I love that.
One of the things I love about this song is this is the first song where George introduces his character of Star Child. And I will say, as a writer, there was one time when Bashir and I were in an editing bay, and while we were editing, we felt a presence behind us. And we turned around, and it was Chris Rock. And he didn't know us from anything. He's like, y'all doing sketch comedy? And we were like, yeah, sir, we are. And he's like, write characters. He was like, people laugh at a sketch, but they remember characters.
Ooh,
and I remember that was like so, it's definitely affected our career every day since.
Wow.
We remember that. And Clinton had sort of a similar revelation. He said, this was the beginning of the characters in the music. I realized by that time that if I dealt with characters, I wouldn't have to worry about getting old. Mickey Mouse never gets old. Cartoons and characters never get old. They have a new Bugs Bunny for the new era. I can't stress enough how smart this is, because if you go see George Clinton right now, it's not just a guy, who looks older in a suit. Like, no, he's still got like the fancy, the crazy glasses and the wigs and everything. And that allows you to see the character over the person.
By the way, another Kiss connection. Those guys can like tour till their grave because they've got the makeup on and the outfits and everything. They could replace members, as they sometimes do, with new people, and you wouldn't even know.
Daft Punk figured it out. They were like, hey, it doesn't have to be two, French guys. It can be robots. And who doesn't like robots?
Big brain.
And by the way, Star Child is not George Clinton. Calvin Broadus is not Snoop Dogg. But the Snoop Dogg character will never age the same way.
He's not really a
Calvin.
doctor.
Exactly. Not really a doctor. Snoop, not really a canine. It's amazing how that works. And I do think that it goes to the larger point that, as we said, this song it seems like the foundation of so much that would come just, 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah.
In the popular zeitgeist. We know that hip hop technically starts around 1973, but it introduces this idea of the character. And with the exception of someone like a Kanye West, what rapper doesn't sort of give us a character and a pseudonym, so to speak, to deliver their music?
Exactly.
So let's hear some of Star Child.
Well, all right. Star Child, citizens of the universe, recording angels, we have returned to claim the pyramids. Partying on the mothership. I am the Mothership Connection.
And this goes to one of the favorite things that I love about the lyrics of this song, is that he takes a spiritual from the old days, basically like, Lord, won't you please come save us? Swing low, sweet chariot.
Right.
They're singing basically take us to heaven.
Right.
But in his sort of Afro-futurism version of this, you know, and we've already said, like, he saw the angels as being sort of like alien in nature. He's saying, hey, swing low, sweet chariot, and let me ride the spaceship back to a place where I'll be happier. Like, it's taking a spiritual and with religious undertones, and it's turning it into a sci-fi story.
Let's hear it.
Swing down, sweet cherry, stop and let me ride.
We start solo.
Swing down, sweet cherry, stop and
then we build to the barbershop doo-wop.
Swing down, sweet cherry, stop
Totally.
and let me ride. Swing down, sweet cherry, stop and let me ride.
That's so evocative.
Ooh, so good.
Not just decades earlier. I mean, this is evocative of a century
earlier.
Absolutely.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. It takes you back 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, because it's evolving spaceships, it's moving you forward 500, 1,000 years.
That's what makes the song so special. It's building in all these different eras and laying the
Layers.
groundwork for a thing that we now take for granted a little bit from the genre of hip hop, which is mixing sounds and genres and eras and references. He's doing it in this song, in so many ways.
The chariot in Dr. Dre's since being an Impala.
Right. Now let's go back in time as we're talking about. This obviously comes from another era, and we hear that in the Clinton version especially. Yep. So the song "Swing Down, Sweet Chariot," separate from "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," is actually, the lyric is itself in the public domain. There's a version from 1946 which sounds like this, and you'll recognize some things like the rhythm of the melody.
Don't you swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride.
Right, that rhythm. Different melody. Let me ride. That rhythm is right there in this Golden Gate Quartet version from 1946 of the song Swing Down Chariot, which itself is a version of a completely different song, but obviously adapted from the spiritual.
Low.
This is the earliest recorded version of the famous spiritual Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. This is the Fisk Jubilee Singers from 1909.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for the Academy home.
By the way, this is an African-American a cappella ensemble in Nashville in the turn of the century. We know, however, that it goes even further back. There isn't a recording, but it's written by a freedman named Wallace Willis, who's credited with composing it in the mid-1800s. So credit where due, at least as far back as...
Was it credited before or after the Civil War? Do we know?
We just know mid-1800s. That's as much as we know in Oklahoma, Indian Territory, Oklahoma.
Wow.
We don't... Wallace Willis...
I bet you there's a great story there. I bet there's a reason why he had to go all the way to Oklahoma to get a patent.
And there's no reason to end the story there. There's an investigation to be had about where maybe he got it from.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right?
I'm sure he may not have invented it.
Right.
But the fact that he had to go that far west to get a copyright is probably a story unto itself.
Bringing it all home, though, we have this mid-1800s line that then gets translated into the spiritual that we know, Swing Low, with the melody that we understand because it's been recorded.
And it goes to the top of the pot charts 110 years later.
Exactly right. We've been talking about this Dre interpolation. Let's hear it.
Creeping back on the street on D's.
Creeping down the back street on D's. I got my Glock cocked cause niggas want these. No soon as I said it,
seems I got sweated by somebody with a Tech 9 trying to take mine. I have a good Dre.
I wish that I hadn't stopped it.
You want to make noise, make boys. All those lyrics in my brain, by the way. Just from that, I remember when that album came out, like, by the time this song starts on that album, The Chronic, I feel like all of us knew, God damn, this is a fucking classic album.
Yeah, it felt that way right away.
I was not a big fan of gangsterism in rap at the time. I was from the Public Enemy school, where I was like, this is hurting our communities. That's a conversation for another day. What I will say is that I knew when this song in particular started, I was like, Dre has won the creative conversation because it was too infectious. It was just too good.
Too hooky. It
was too hooky. It was clean. It sounded great on your speakers, whether you had like the fancy Allen Ed AutoZone speakers or whether you just had like the factory Honda speakers. It all sounded great.
And it's such a great homage to George Clinton and Mothership Connection, where it comes from. We're going to get into a couple more layers that we've already alluded to. But just 2 years later, it already has become kind of a canonical reference to West Coastness.
Absolutely.
So much so that Regulate, Warren G and Nate Dogg, go back and listen to that episode. But just 2 years later, it gets referenced right here.
She said my chords broke down and just sing real nice with you. Let me ride. I got
Nice callback.
Nice callback. That's right.
You know, a lot's been said about George Clinton's influence on G-Funk with songs like Snoop Dogg's What's My Name and Ice Cube's Bob Gun. But like literally his fingerprints are across the genres and even in hip hop where like it was very stratified, whether it was like East Coast or West Coast. Like I could think of De La Soul's Me, Myself and I, which sampled Knee Deep.
It's just me, myself and I. It's just me, myself and I.
Crucial Conflict out of Chicago. Crucial Conflict's Hey, which sampled I'll Stay.
Sitting on the quota via hey, strangers feeling good today. I'm toe up in the
flow. Eric B. and Rakim's absolute classic, I Know You Got Soul, which sampled You'll Like It Too.
It's been a long time, I shouldn't have left you without a strong rhyme to step to. Think of how many weeks shows you slept through. Time's up, I'm sorry.
There's almost just too much to count, and it is still being loved because I think it's very important to point out, as much as we've talked about him laying the groundwork for hip-hop for, let's say it's, first 30 years of being on the radio, he's still being sampled.
That's right.
He's been sampled by Kendrick Lamar for Wesley's Theory.
But I just want to fuck.
He's on that record. It's not just a sample.
Oh, I know.
He's on the track.
Totally.
Yeah.
We talked about Redbone with Childish Gambino. There's also Burning Down the House by Flying Lotus.
Burning up the church. Blow dry me, baby. Blow dry me.
And Hyena by Travis Scott. This is a man who's still relevant when it comes to today's leading contemporary hip-hop artists. With all this, sort of funk water under the bridge, what do you think is the lasting legacy of Mothership Connection and George Clinton?
So as we've been discussing, there's the Mothership Connection and then there's the James Brown and Bootsy Connection.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting to me is to think of maybe James Brown and Bootsy being the link. The James Brown era of breakbeats and sort of early hip hop has a lot of James Brown. We mentioned Eric B. and Rakim, I Know You Got Soul. Today, if you were to do that, you'd be sounding like early hip hop. You'd be sounding like the 80s via the late 60s, early 70s sample that you'd be using. But if you sample something from the P-Funk catalog, it's going to sound more contemporary. It will sound more modern. It might evoke the 90s as another layer, kind of like the swing low layer has like 5 different eras just by the use of that. But I think it's really interesting that as a bridge, we literally have on this song 3 performers, 3 instrument players that had been with James Brown, brought the one with them, brought some of the techniques of funk, and brought some of that with them into this new entity with this song in this year in 1975 and set up this new 30 years, as we've been saying, this next chapter of hip hop.
I like that.
But Diallo, what about you? What do you think the legacy is?
Look, man, I think of George Clinton as hip hop's crazy cool uncle. And in some ways, I feel like he's more
so good.
The pure father of what hip hop becomes than some of the people who get name checked for that regularly. Because think about it, like David Bowie has the Ziggy Stardust, persona. He's got that character who he has, but you wouldn't call him the father of hip hop.
Right.
You've got the Jamaican culture and the chatting over the record. So George isn't the first to sort of do this proto hip hop.
That's right.
Proto rap, I should say, over a track. But you've got that element too.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got just the pure danceability of funk coming in on the one and that BPM that's so important to hip hop. And yet that's there too via George and Bernie and Bootsy. So when you think about somebody who's assembling all the different elements of hip hop at a time right before hip hop explodes, it'd be hard to make a case that anyone is more responsible for that assemblage than George Clinton.
That is a great way of putting it. Assembly is such a great word for it, too. He's assembling the eras, the sounds, the techniques, the performers. There's 200 members.
Art.
There's 200 players amongst in the 50-year career of P-Funk. There's been 200 people that play with the band. So he's finding talent and assembling that as well.
Okay, Luxury, it's time for one more song. This is the segment where we share a deep cut or a hidden gem with you, the One Song Nation, and with each other. Luxury, would you like to go first?
Sure. Well, another band that was heavily influenced by Parliament Funkadelic, and another one of my favorite unsung bands. They're called Fishbone. LA people know Fishbone
Shout out
well.
to Norwood.
I can't believe it's taken us 90 episodes for me to finally play a Fishbone song, but here it is, Bonin' in the Boneyard from Truth and Soul.
From the ocean, yeah, it's all right. Yeah.
I love Fishbone. What a great call.
One of the most exciting live bands I've ever seen, and that is a sentiment shared by many people. They have not gotten their due in the world. Go check out Fishbone.
When I first moved to LA, I met Norwood. What a cool guy.
They have a new record coming out, and George Clinton is featured on it. So it's just all coming full circle.
That's fantastic.
What about you, Diallo? What is your one more song?
I'm always interested in trying to break subgenres like drum and bass and UK garage into more of the mainstream US musical diet. Mm-hmm. And Pink Panthers, who I've talked about on the show before, has come out with a brand new album, Fancy That. For those of you who like, the electronic music of the early 2000s, I'm talking Underworld and Basement Jaxx, just know that this young lady, in collaboration with her producer partners, has released this new album that samples a lot of artists from that era. Here's just one song off of that album. It's Girls Like Me. I mean, like, if you listen to that song, you'll hear a sampling, not of just Romeo by Basement Jaxx, one of my favorite Basement Jaxx. You'll also hear Always Be There, which admittedly I'm furious about because I always felt like I was going to, at some point in life, sample Always Be There for one of my own songs. Pink Panthers has beat me to it. Go get your Pink Panthers.
No, but it's not too late because now if you do it, there'll be a layered reference there. I like it even better now.
I like it. I'll be the Warren G to her Dr. Dre. There you go.
Exactly right.
As always, if you have an idea for one more song, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok. You can find me on Instagram at Diallo, Diallo, just 6 letters, and on TikTok at Diallo Riddle.
And you can find me on Instagram at LUXXURY and on TikTok at LuxuryXX.
And hey, go follow One Song on Instagram and TikTok. Go follow at One Song Podcast for exclusive content. You can also watch full episodes of One Song on YouTube and Spotify. Just search for One Song Podcast. We'd love it if you like and subscribe.
Also, be sure to check out the One Song Spotify playlist for all the songs we discuss in our episodes. You can find the link in our episode description.
And if you made it this far, we think that means you like this podcast. So please don't forget to give us 5 stars, leave a review, and share us with someone you think would like it. It really helps keep the show going. Luxury, help us in this thing.
I'm producer, DJ, songwriter, and musicologist Luxury.
And I'm actor, writer, director, and sometimes DJ Diallo Riddle.
And this is One Song. We will see you next time.
This episode is produced by Melissa Duenas. Our video editor is Casey Simonson. Our associate producer is Jeremy Bimbo. Mixing by Michael Hardman and engineering by Eric Hicks. Production supervision by Razak Boykin. Additional production support from Z Taylor. This show is executive produced by Kevin Hart, Mike Stein, Brian Smiley, Eric Eddings, Eric Weil, and Leslie Guam.